breakfast. Well, let's talk about it. No, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. And he called an hour later and he said, Dad, I don't know what's reality and what isn't. Well, that was it. Jumped in my car. I headed to New York. My wife called ahead. Thankfully, she's very resourceful. She actually got us a psychiatrist who we could go see. And I took my son, and we went over there, and we saw this psychiatrist. And he walked out, and he says, okay, Mr. Earley, if you're lucky, your son's using drugs. And if you're not, he has a mental illness, bipolar disorder. Now, I want to point out something here it's really important, something I've discovered during my travels. My son went voluntarily. He was confused. He wanted to know what was going on with him. He didn't fight me on that. He went with me. And then what happened? Well, this doctor sat us down and he says, I'm not one of these guys who sugarcoats things. Let me tell you what you're in for. Bipolar is incurable. It lasts forever. You're always going to be sick. You'll have to take powerful medications that will make you gain weight, medications that will make you feel hungry, medications that will make you confused. You're probably not going to be able to work because of that. And you're not going to have any kind of really promising career. Marriage? Not likely. Family? Ooh, too risky. And if your mental illness gets worse, there's a good chance you're going to get arrested. You may end up homeless, and you may end up in jail. When we walked out of that office, my son turned to me and he said, Dad, that guy's crazy. My wife was recently diagnosed with kidney cancer. What was the first thing we did? We looked at the odds and we said, we're going to beat that. We're going to do better than that. That's not going to be us. That's what my son thought. He wasn't going to become one of those homeless, psychotic people wandering the streets. I'm not like them, Dad. He was defiant. And the doctor gave him a prescription, and he took his pills, and he got better. And he quit taking the pills, and I was so stupid. I thought it was like aspirin. Headache goes away. You don't take aspirin. And I thought everything was fine. The point was, he was not resistant to treatment, and it wasn't a lack of mental illness. Well, 6 months later, he had a full-blown attack, and this time it was a lack of any kind of insight. His college roommates brought him down and literally shoved him in my hands. And I said, okay, we're going to go to see a psychiatrist. He said, no, I'm not. And he went running away. Well, finally, he came out 4 hours later. He thought he was going to marry Natalie Portman, which would have been great. I tricked him into getting into the car, told him that Natalie Portman's at the hospital. My wife called ahead. We drove over there. She explained the situation. And when we got there, there were 2 big security guards there because my son was acting so wildly. And they tossed him down, and he got dragged in, and he got given a shot of Haldol, which knocked him out for 3 days. And then they called and told me, you need to come get him. What did that teach him? What experience did that give him? He wasn't engaged in our mental health system. He was brutalized, terrified by it. He went back to school angry. Once again, he stopped taking his pills. About 6 months later, I got a call from his older brother. He says, Dad, you have to come to New York. Kevin is crazy. So I raced to New York, and my son had been wandering around for 5 days. He barely had slept. He hadn't eaten. He was sure God had him on some secret mission. And during that frantic ride from New York to Fairfax County, where I live, he would laugh 1 minute, and he'd begin crying the next. And he said, Dad, how would you feel if someone you love killed himself? And I pleaded with him to take his medication. He screamed, pills are poison. Leave me alone. Pills are poison. Well, I got him to the emergency room, and I remember talking to the nurse. And she rolled her eyes while he talked this gibberish. And then we were taken into a room all by ourselves, away from everyone else, because he was acting so wildly. And we sat there, and we sat there. And we sat there, and after 4 hours, my son said, "There's nothing wrong with me. I'm leaving." I said, hang on. I literally went out and I grabbed a doctor, and I will never forget how that doctor came in the room. He came in with his hands up as if he was surrendering. He says, "I'm sorry, Mr. Earley, I really can't help your son." I said, "You haven't even examined him." And he said it didn't matter. Virginia law at that time was very specific, very clear. Unless a person posed an imminent, immediate danger to himself or others, he could not be forced to go into treatment. He could not be forced to take medication. And the nurse had told him that my son thought all pills were poison. So he turned to me and he says, "Mr. Earley, you seem like a nice guy. I'll tell you what, you bring your son back after he tries to kill you or kill someone else." Well, I took my son home. And I watched during the next 48 hours him sleep deeper and deeper until mental abyss. At one point, he had tinfoil wrapped around his head to keep the CIA from reading his thoughts through the television set. He slipped out of the house. He slipped out early one morning. He broke into a stranger's house. Luckily, no one was there. It was a holiday, and they were away. He broke in to take a bubble bath. It took 5 police officers to get him out in an attack dog. And when they did, they took him over to the local mental health center, and they called me, and I went racing over there. And luckily, a policeman was standing outside, a compassionate guy, and he said, "Let me talk to you by father. Unless you go in and you tell that psychiatrist in there he's threatened to kill you, he will not meet the state's imminent danger criteria, and we're going to take him to jail, and you don't want that." "He hasn't threatened to kill me," I said, and he shrugged. So I'm here to tell you, and I do it with no great pride because it hurt my relationship with my son. I went in, I lied. I said my son had threatened to kill me, and that was good enough to get him held for 24 hours, at which point he voluntarily checked himself into a hospital. Less than 24 hours later, after my son had signed himself into that hospital, I got a call from his doctor. He says, "Mr. Earley, I'm sorry, your insurance company isn't going to pay. They say he's not a danger to himself or others." Well, I called that insurance company. And I happened to mention that I used to work at the Washington Post. And I happened to mention that I was friends with Mike Wallace on 60 Minutes, and they should expect a call from Mike, who suffered from depression. Can you imagine getting that call? "This is Mike Wallace with 60 Minutes. Why is Pete Earley's son not allowed to My son was allowed to stay for an incredible 14 days. In the short time between picking up my son in New York, I had lied to get him into treatment, and I'd violated my ethics because reporters aren't supposed to bully people like that. And when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. I got a call from the Fairfax County Police Department. My son was charged with 2 felonies, breaking and entering and destruction of property. I was so frustrated. Virginia law had kept him from getting help when he needed it. Now it wanted to punish him for a crime he'd committed. My son became one of those 365,000 people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and major depression sitting in jails and prisons. He became one of the 2.2 million persons with mental illness who get arrested in a year-long process. He became one of the 40% of persons with mental illness who NAMI says will have an encounter with the police because of their psychosis. I could go on and on and on. Look, this is what I had to cut out of my speech thanks to Judge Leifman. And if you think Alabama is immune from that, forget it. Do you know right now if someone in Alabama has a breakdown like my son, the chances are 4 to 1 he'll end up in jail rather than he will getting any kind of help. It's this third incident with my son when the hospital turned him away because he was not dangerousness. Now, our legal system kept me from getting him help. He wasn't engaged. Well, what happened? A judge sentenced him to 2 years probation. And during that time, he did great. He had a court order. He had to take medication. We're very fortunate. My son is helped with medication. He got a job. He was selling shoes. He was doing fantastic. He got a promotion. Wow, life was great. And as soon as that 2 years of probation ended, he stopped taking his medication. Well, I thought, I'm smarter than he is. I'll work on him. The first thing I tried was logic. I took a notepad. I put on here 1/2, 1/2, and I said, let's look at this. These are the times when you've gotten into trouble. And these are the times when you've done great. What's the difference? Oh, look, you're on your medication. And I found out that you can't argue logic with a person who's not thinking logically. You can't out-argue a mental illness. Okay, I tried to offer a carrot. I'll pay you $50 a week if you come and take your pill in front of me every day. He got angry. I'm no prostitute. All right, I tried duplicity. I ground up his medicine. I got up in the morning and I fixed him breakfast. And he was a bit suspicious because I don't usually do that. And what I discovered was if you grind up Depakote, that little pink shell, it floats. And he got angry. So then I got mad and I practiced tough love. I said, you either take your meds or you can't live with me. And he said a few words I won't repeat, and he went to go live with my ex-wife. And he was angry at me. Logic, bribes, duplicity, tough love. He was getting worse, and I knew it. I knew I was going to lose him. So I called a mobile crisis response team. They're supposed to come over and help. I said, listen, I need your help. My son is off his meds. He's starting to slip. Please come and help me. And the operator said, well, is he dangerous? And I said, no, he's not dangerous. Let me listen to what happened last time. Oh, no, that's not fair. You can't judge him on what happened last time. And I got a little indignant. And the person on the other end of the line explained to me that I live in a county of 1.4 million that gets over 500 police calls a month dealing with mental illness. And until my son became dangerous, don't call back. Well, a few nights later, I got a call from my ex-wife who was locked in the bathroom. She said, please come. I went over, and my son was out of control. And I called that same dispatcher. I said, please come. My son is violent. And the dispatcher said, oh, wait a minute. Is he dangerous or is he violent? And I said, he's violent. The dispatcher said, oh, we don't come if they're violent. You need to call the police. So I called the police. And they came and they shot my